Hello, it's Dr. David Greene, founder and CEO of R3 Stem Cell and R3 International. Today we're discussing what are exosomes. We get that question so much that I wanted to clarify. First, I wanted to talk about stem cells a bit to lay the groundwork. Stem cells reside in every tissue of our adult bodies. That's the good news. They're all over the place. The bad news is that as we go through life, the amount we make and the quality of those stem cells continues to decrease. They get lazy and there's less of them. Now, a lot of these stem cells that lie in these tissues are dormant. They're called satellite cells. They're not actually performing a function at that time. They can be woken up, but that unfortunately doesn't happen enough. Now, here's the economics 101 lesson of losing stem cells. As we get older, we need more of them, right? We have tissues that are breaking down. We have metabolic processes that need help. So the demand continues to increase, but the supply continues to decrease. And it's not like we could go out and just pay more at the gas pump for gas when that happens. No, it's not. You can't buy stem cells at your local drugstore. And this is the end result, is that there's a huge discrepancy between what we need and what's available. So here's an example of that, and this shows the amount of stem cells that are available in our bone marrow with aging. When you're born, 1 in 10,000 cells in your bone marrow is a stem cell. But you can see by the age of 30, that's dropped by 25 times. And then by the age of 60, it's dropped down to 1 in every 2 million cells in your bone marrow is a stem cell. So it's like a needle in a haystack. And that's why none of our centers around the world offer bone marrow stem cell therapy, because the numbers are just terrible. So here's a close-up of an exosome, and we're going to start delving into those. An exosome, first off to mention, is not an actual cell. It doesn't replicate like other cells. It doesn't have the same types of components. It is made by cells. All different types of cells make exosomes. The ones that we really care about are the ones that are made by stem cells. So look at it, this one, let's say this is a stem cell, and this is the outer membrane of that cell. Inside, there are components called endosomes, and these are vesicles. Think of them as a bubble with components inside, and these are what's going to become the exosomes, okay? Eventually, those vesicles or that bubble, will combine with the outer surface and release its contents, okay? And as you can see, those are what's called exosomes. They're also called extracellular, outside the cell, vesicles, okay? And in the exosomes are a lot of DNA, RNA, and other proteins like cytokines and growth factors. And I call it an information payload because it contains so much information that it's going to bring to what's called a target cell. As you know, it floats through the bloodstream and it will find cells that are in need. All right, there'll be receptors on the surface, either they're suffering from inflammation or some kind of a process where they need to get repaired, and they will attract these exosomes. So exosomes started to get a boatload of attention back around 2005 due to the experiment you see here on the left. And the experiment revolved around a function called Parabiosis. So basically what they did, and this was at Stanford, they took mice, young mice and old mice, and they spliced together their circulation. So in the experiment, they took young mouse to a young mouse, they took an old mouse to an old mouse, and then they spliced together a young mouse and an old mouse. And what they wanted to see is how well each of these mice would repair some muscle damage. So when they gave muscle damage to the old mice that were attached to each other, they just didn't repair it very well, and that was expected. The young mice that were attached to each other repaired the muscle damage remarkably, just like it was expected. And the old mouse paired with the young mouse, so in A up here, this is the young mouse, and the white one is the old mouse. Okay? So when they spliced together those two mice, what they found is that the young mouse healed the skeletal muscle damage just like they expected. All right, very, very well. The old mouse, the ability to repair the muscle was amped up considerably. The repair actually looked under the microscope like it was a young mouse. So it worked from that regard. And that phenomenon is called parabiosis. People in layman's terms call it the fountain of youth. And then what they wanted to see was what was doing the magic. What was the young mouse giving to the old mouse in order to amp up that repair process? So then phase 2 of the study is they radio-labeled the stem cells from the young mouse that were going over into the old mouse. And they wanted to see if they would be able to see that radio-label uptake in the muscle repair. And the answer was no, they did not see any of it. So it wasn't the stem cells from the young mouse that were forming or differentiating into the muscle cells, the myocytes. So then the question is, what was doing it? And the answer is most likely it was the exosomes. So as a result of that, a lot has happened. There's many, many, many studies that have been done and are ongoing for these extracellular vesicles, exosomes. And there's companies that have formed, such as this one in Silicon Valley, backed by Peter Thiel, billionaire. And they're looking at parabiosis, where you take a young person's blood plasma, transfuse it into an older person to hopefully give them some fountain of youth effect. So how are exosomes made? Well, as I mentioned, in a true sense, they're made by cells, any type of cell. But we care about the ones that come from stem cells. So in a typical process for stem cells, we get tissue from a consenting donor after a scheduled C-section. And that includes the placenta, the umbilical cord, and amniotic fluid. So here you see a cross-section of an umbilical cord. All right, you have the two arteries and a vein. And then all of this gelatinous material surrounding those vessels is called Wharton's jelly. And Wharton's jelly is very well known because it's a huge source of very active mesenchymal stem cells. And we use those in biologics all the time. Anybody who comes to one of our centers most likely is going to get an umbilical cord stem cell biologic made from Wharton's jelly. Okay. Now, the way that exosome products are made is you take those mesenchymal stem cells from Wharton's jelly, and they're in the lab, such as you see on the right here, and under a hood and controlled conditions, those stem cells get cultured, and the byproducts of those stem cells are often exosomes, as I showed you on the previous picture. That is what the culturing produces, is billions of exosomes that go into the exosome biologic. All right, so here we are back at the exosome diagram again, and I've zoomed out so you can see a little more of the picture of what happens. As the exosomes get released from the cell with the DNA, the RNA, the cytokines, the growth factors, the information payload, they will float through the bloodstream, and eventually they will get eaten, I guess the scientific term is invaginated, by a recipient cell, a target cell that is in need of some repair. So I want to show you a more intricate diagram, and this is actually reversed. So this is where the exosome ends up getting made. Like I said, the endosomal vesicle that contains the exosomes inside that will then get released through a process called exocytosis. And then the exosomes float through the bloodstream, and here you see where it gets attracted to a target cell. And through this complicated process, it gets invaginated, eaten, basically, and then it will release all of the components, the microRNA, the messenger RNA, the various cytokines and growth factors. And what you can see, there it's getting eaten, all these different functions, and this is just a few of them, that it does with cellular signaling. And then it also participates in immune responses for phagocytosis and other functions. So what a lot of people will say is, well, I'm going to use exosomes and I'm just going to cut out the stem cell middleman. But in actuality, it's more like this, right? Where normally a stem cell would produce an exosome, and that would help facilitate, cell-to-cell signaling in the recipient. So really, the exosome is the middleman, and you just cut out the source. Here's a small list of some of the components that have been identified in exosomes. And all I really want to explain here is that there's so many growth factors, cytokines, interleukins, and they have so many different functions that they help with. Brain development, new blood flow, new neuron development, negative regulation of apoptosis, so they stop cell death. There's so many things that they do to help reprogram and regenerate the target cells that they end up in. Now, as I mentioned, exosomes are byproducts of stem cells. They're made from Wharton's jelly. After the umbilical cord is donated, it goes to an FDA registered lab. Our lab's been around for 15 years. And then the Wharton's jelly umbilical cord stem cells are cultured in a good manufacturing practice, CGMP fashion, to make the exosome product. So I wanted to show you this because a lot of companies that are on the market will say, oh, we have 100 billion exosomes, per cc, or some ridiculously high number. The way they come to that number is inappropriate. The way that they'll do it is they'll take a cell counter, and as I mentioned, these are not cells, but they're just counting by size. Exosomes are very small. They're anywhere from 40 nanometers up to about 150 nanometers. They're about 3 times smaller than stem cells. So what these cell counters will do is they'll pick a size range, and they'll pick these spikes, and they will count them that way. Okay? So they'll just basically pick the size in between. That is inappropriate. And the reason why is because there's a lot of things that could be in that size range. It could be an exosome. It could be a dead cell. A cell dies, it loses its water, it ends up getting much, much smaller than it started as. Or it could just be a trash protein that really doesn't do anything. So the best way to count it is the way that our lab does, where you take the exosome, the biologic, and you add the surface markers for exosomes. There are 3 of them. You can see them here, CD9, CD36, and CD81. Those attach specifically to exosomes. So for instance, under this immunofluorescence image here, you can see all 3 of the attachments, and there's a lot of them, right? Then if you break them out into the various surface markers, you can then see exactly what we're talking about as far as density. You can get a very accurate exosome count in the product that way, and that's how we know very specifically how many exosomes there are per cc, as opposed to just guessing with a size counter. So over the last few years, exosomes have become extremely popular in research studies, and I just pulled together some titles here. Here's one looking at extracellular vesicles, exosomes for kidney disease. Here's one for lung, for COPD. Another one for inflammatory diseases, such as rheumatoid arthritis. Here's another one for diabetes. Another one for metabolic disease, such as, once again, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, lupus. Musculoskeletal diseases, i.e. arthritis. Down here you can see they're very helpful in ischemic stroke. And then at the bottom, neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So oftentimes the way that we look at using exosomes for treatment is with what we call the 1-2 punch. So exosomes can act very quickly on what's wrong in the body. And it can give you somewhat of a sustained effect, but not like what you see with umbilical cord stem cells. So with the first punch, you get this kind of a wave pattern, and with the umbilical cord stem cells, you get a more delayed but sustained reaction. So a few key things to know about exosomes. They do not get rejected. They have been very, very safe. We've used them many, many times, either by themselves or with the umbilical cord stem cells. They go through the same quality assurance standards for safety as the stem cell biologics. So in the U.S., the FDA regulates them the same. Internationally, the quality assurance standards at the labs either meet or exceed, in most cases, what the FDA requires in the U.S. They are very, very small, so it doesn't matter what size needle is used for, let's say, aesthetics, for hair, face, or sexual wellness. It just doesn't matter. They're not going to be affected at all. Whereas if you use a really, really small needle, you can affect the viability of stem cells themselves. So with exosomes, you can do a procedure with them by themselves. Depending on the protocol, we often use them with the stem cell biologic or with PRP. And it all depends on the patient's condition. We have close to 20 different protocols that we use for conditions, and those could change depending on the severity. So there's no one hammer for every nail, so to speak. R3 Stem Cell, since I started the company 8 years ago, we now have 45 centers of excellence worldwide that have done over 15,000 stem cell and exosome procedures. We have clinics in the U.S., Mexico, Pakistan, more to come as we grow. Visit us online at r3stemcell.com and then call us at 844-GET-STEM or use the USA prefix 001 and then call 888-988-0515. We look forward to hearing from you, and we'll set you up for a free phone consultation so you can find out if you or a loved one is a candidate. Thank you.